You are listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. This show is dedicated to those who live and love from the heart in infinite ways. In today's episode, we will discuss, share, gain insights, and get clarity on the wisdom and teachings of the mystic and seer Almin, as well as discover more about the miraculous healing modality called Belvaspata. Your host for this show is Paul.
Welcome to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. It's Thursday, the 23rd of November, and today's cosmic mantra says, I trust my ability to maintain the health and strength of my body. And this is the angel Haranas. Through the seer's eyes, Almin tells us, by only following your heart and avoiding challenges, you forsake your growth. For every opportunity to go beyond our comfort zone that we avoid, someone else has to pick up our responsibilities. Fascinating insight, spot on, and part of a conversation I had with a colleague of mine today whilst we were meeting, and then I had a 2-hour drive in the most, shall I say, backed up traffic I've been in for many, many years, and 2 hours in from Johannesburg back to home here in Benoni. But here we are, live and running Radio Belvaspata. Tonight we are talking about truth, authenticity and perception and the roles that they play in it. And our focus really tonight is just to show where we've all come from, where we're all going to, the progress that we may have made within ourselves on an individual level and also on a cosmic level, taking some old audio, taking some good songs and just beginning to mix them and merge them together all into oneness. But what's most important is that you are listening to the show with us. So we have the next hour together as a light family, as a support system of working through the teachings of this Seer Almin and Belvaspata healing modality. And we're going to start off with some great audio on purpose by our very own Nico. It's a cover song that he performed called You're Still You.
Through the darkness, I can see your light, and you will always shine, and I can feel your heart in mine. Your face I've memorized, I idolize just you. I look up to everything you are. In my eyes you do no wrong. I've loved you for so long, and after all is said and done, you're still you. After all, you're still you. You walk past me, I can feel your pain. Time changes everything, one truth always stays the same. You're still you. After all, you're still you. I look up to everything you are. In my eyes you do no wrong, and I believe in you, although you never ask me to. I will remember you and what life put you through. I'm in the school and lonely world, I found one love. You're still you after all. You're still you.
Welcome back to the studio. I'm your host, Paul, on tonight's edition of Radio Belvaspatar South Africa, entitled Truth, Authenticity and Perception. So we're going to go into some great audio with the Siya Almin in a few minutes. But I want to tell you a little bit about what I discovered, and I've been trying to look at some of the depth of these words. The aspect of the Lemurian word for absolute truth is Agawa Natvi. There are several other words for other forms of truth, such as Barach, Sur Unat, or Ple Hava. The concept of eternal truth is described as the ongoing expression of infinite life, rather than yesterday's truth that no longer applies today. I've been finding myself saying a lot to people, even to myself, is that, tomorrow is not today, and so we shouldn't base tomorrow events or processes on anything that is happening today, because everything shifts, everything is capable of shifting me. But I must say, for me, there's a lot of old belief systems coming up. Chatting to a colleague of mine today who has some beautifully spiritual aspects within herself, that she was talking about limitlessness and all sorts of these incredible dynamic processes that she's experiencing and just putting into place for herself. And the one thing that she was saying there really is about, what is the matter with people? What is the matter with humanity? And boy, I'm not used to driving these crazy traffic moments any longer, but today certainly taught me how crazy people can actually be. I just think that they try to seal themselves into a metal piece of moving engine, literally, and then think that they are safe, and just obscuring everything and everybody else's point of view, perception, right of way, etc., etc. It just seems like everybody's gone there. This is all about me, and I'm the only one that's involved in it. And we're seeing more and more and more of it. Nick and I often have this discussion, about where people are at. And we've noticed that there's a lot of people leaving our space. And some, yes, we are consciously doing it. And then we're seeing sudden surges and shifts. And I was looking at all of that this last week, and then Nick and I made just made an agreement together just to let things be as they are. Let's see how they go. Let's just see what happens, and just trust the process is opening up more doors to other things, because the dynamics of what we've been working with on many levels are all now shifting and altering, and nothing ever remains the same, does it? But the belief systems I've had coming up along the way is like, thinking about aspects of prayer and thinking of aspects of God, but on a religious level, and not really participating in it, but being aware of where we're going with all of these things. So again, we know that that is not the truth. These are just programmed beliefs. And then when we were putting the show together today, we actually found this incredible audio by the Siya Almin, and it's published, first of all, in 2013, but absolutely relevant right now. And it says, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" And it's all about being crucified by the matrices. And I know some of you will understand the pressure that is going on within your own lives, because you've been sharing it, what this aspect of crucifixion. Is that the correct word? I nearly said crucifixation, but there we go. Of being crucified by the matrices. And then, of course, if we're not careful, we suffer intensely through it. Let's listen to Almi now as she goes into this audio and works through explaining what things are like as we step into different levels of the matrix.
All right, so Almin, I had this dream wherein I said to you, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Could you elaborate?
I've looked really deeply into the dream symbols that you gave me, and what that refers to is really quite a deep mystery, because the cosmos can be described as a window. The window is made up of the matrices, and many of the beings have been, well, most beings in existence have been stuck or entrenched in the window. But what's happened is that the sticky stuff of belief systems have captured them, so they sit like flies on fly paper against the rim of the window. The quadrant can be described by the flower, the seed of life. It can be described by the Torah's tree of life, by the I Ching, and by the Dzogchen. The 4 stages of development. Well, the 4 stages of development have created several vehicles through which life moves around and around the windowsill. And it is spirit, soul, body, and there are 2 levels of spirit, so that makes a total of 4 sides through which life moves. Now, beings have traveled around and around, and that is the reason for the linear change. But the actual purpose for the window was like a magnifying glass in which the infinite, which is boundless, examines a small portion of itself. If you open a window in a dark room, the sunlight comes through. It is only because the dust particles in the air light up those sunbeams as they come through that you can really see them. You can't see light beams directly. The illumination of the infinite's being cannot be seen by it directly. So it created individuations. The individuations they were created, but they were really not. They are eternal, but let's not go there. But the individuations are the dust particles that are the form within the formless light. And so it was meant that the dust particles, the individuations of all beings, dance their dance of their free volition. There is no right and wrong way to dance this dance, because it is beside the point. It is just out of the sheer joy of existence. The infinite observes its own light only when it is illuminated through these dust particles or the individuations of beings. But as the light has shone through the window has been represented by matrices that got thicker and thicker as the belief systems grew. This has entrapped the beings that should be flying in the air to illuminate the infinite's light so that it may study itself. Much the same way that the ocean could study itself by putting a bucket in the bottom of the ocean, so that it can look within the bucket to see at least a very small section of itself. So, as we have been in this matrix, the windowsill itself and the whole experiment would have failed if somebody stepping into the matrix did not in fact make the journey around and around to all 4 sides of the window. Different beings, depending on who they are, how much of each of these sides has infiltrated them in that they believe it to be them, they have different time. They have different speeds at which they travel around and around until they can eventually find their way out of there and do what is called the eternal dance. The eternal dance is the dance of individuations within the illumination of the infinite. So I have moved around when I got into the mirrors at a faster pace than you chose to make the transitions. And as a result, it has seemed as though I have abandoned yourself and other loved ones of my own. The truth of the matter is that just recently I have begun to realize this analogy that I've given you, and realized that I simply don't belong in the window at all. I do not belong in the spirit or the body or the soul. They are merely the vehicles that have collected the stories of the experience of the trapped particles that have had no choice but to go around and around, because to stand still was to completely lose that individuation. So I have just begun to withdraw from the games of the Matrix. I don't justify my actions anymore. I don't attempt to pacify others' reason, and I am no longer inhibited by clocks and time. And I do the best I can, it is not 100%, to say, no, that's not my reality. And to disconnect my energy entirely from body, soul, and spirit. Because beyond it lives the formlessness, and within it, the formed, which is eternal, and it has no beginning and no end. We can say that there has been beginnings and there have been ends because of this matrix. There always is a point at which life leaves one side of it, whether it's an individual moving from life to death or from death to ascension, but there always is a seeming ending and a seeming beginning. But in fact, when you step out of the sticky windowsill to dance in the light that shines through the window, you realize that your existence is one of endless beginnings.
You're back in studio with myself, Paul, and Nico handling the sound desk. And yay, our signal seems strong, even though we are sitting outside with a huge thunderstorm and lightning storm. Great illumination of light going on out there for sure. So Almin was talking there about the, aspects of why we feel sometimes that God has forsaken us, and as we let go of that, a whole lot of new thing comes in there. But go back to 2013 there, and there she's actually telling us what her lessons were and the things that she's had to work with and discover her own truths and processes as we're going along. And last week up on Almin Diary, there was a strong response from Almin to her critics, and I know this comes from various posts and emails and messages that were sent to her, especially when she was suggesting that it's no time for people to turn vegan, vegetarian, and that we shouldn't be having meat, etc., etc. But I think her integrity and authenticity was called into action there. So she's done a beautiful job of explaining it, and we'll hear why in a few minutes. But there's a strong response from Almin to her critics online, and the question is that I'm one of your Russian students and have been studying with you for several years. Many students walked away when you went into the hospital at the end of 2014. They feel it's a sign of weakness to end up in hospital, something they thought you had risen above. What explanation should I give them? They did not expect this. It seemed like a victimhood, so they walked away. Can you see the perception already go there? People's need for their own truth to come up. Very, very fascinating. I remember lots of discussion amongst the Light family around the world, and I was amazed at the amount of people that actually just stood up and found their own way and stepped forward and started creating a lot of processes for themselves. Really, really dynamic. But Elmine answers, she says, and this depth in this, she says, in 2005 and 2006, I had been trying to get rid of 5 major cosmic shadow beings. It felt as if I was in a war. The more I opposed them, the stronger they got. I then started racing against the clock. Every destructive deed I saw they would do had me working through the night to transcend and move out of the way. It felt as though I was constantly on the run to save the planet and its people. I finally found a way to deal with this after years of battling. And I had to learn the hard way that opposition was not the answer. But they kept me on the run by holding staff members hostage and my family members, etc. And I had no downtime to really figure it out. What I did is to do something that they didn't expect. I captured these dark beings by placing them in 5 gallstones inside my gallbladder. I went to the doctor and told him what was wrong with me, but because he wasn't the one to discover it, he denied that anything was wrong with me at all. I then left to lecture in Alaska, and at the airport I realized I had to have these stones out and burned as soon as possible. I called an ambulance and they confirmed the situation, and I had gallbladder surgery. My entire Alaskan class, except for 3, spent their time voicing all the reasons that I was worse than a fake and walked away. This spread through my student base, and within a few weeks I had hardly any students left. There are at least 2 more such incidents that had happened before the Alaskan incident. The coma that occurred at the end of 2014 not only had this effect in Russian students, but some in Canada and America that had studied with me for 15 years, who had had miraculous healings with me. They also left without even inquiring as to how things turned out. Almine's comments here, and you can just see where she's working from in a huge different space. I have fortunately never succumbed to the temptation of seeing my success in numbers of students, nor relying on them for my income. There can be no success unless one is invested in convincing others, invested in being right. I am passionately engaged in learning, with or without others who feel the same. I have managed to overcome my disappointment in their not having seen that the insights we were given were so priceless that there really is no other place to go. Remember earlier I spoke well about all the people leaving our space and how we're actually making some of them leave, and then Almine just confirms what is going on for us. Every time this shedding of students happen, we make a very dramatic shift, like dead leaves being shaken off the tree. It feels much lighter and clearer after that. I don't regard your illnesses that we heal together through the healing oils as failures, but as opportunities to work on planetary issues by overcoming it within yourself as a message for your next step. Don't approach me with codependent agendas and preconceived notions as to how I should be. I am unwilling to try and meet anyone's expectations, but for your sake, don't approach your eternal journey with expectations either. We haven't been here before, and whether ailments are still needed as a guiding measure or not, cannot be foreseen by us, nor judged as unholy. And just for the masters around the world, this came up for me today, the principle of high magic number 118. Stay true to yourself here, folks. Being around the public creates a deep tension in a master. The only way to appreciate their folly and to see it in a poetic light is to observe them from inner space, from the outside looking in. So I'd like to pause for a few minutes now and just spend 4 or 5 minutes with Almine in a meditation called the Eternal Garden of Discovery of the Self. And it's taken back to 2014, but I think it's absolutely just so beautiful. It's just an intro of that meditation. It's available elsewhere if you want it, but let's listen to that. So if you are listening to this as a download and driving, it's a meditation, so please do not close your eyes, maybe just pull over. But I think most people listen to this, when they are seated or laying down or just relaxing. So here's a meditation with the Seer Almin.
May I move through eternity on the never-ending journey of existence, free as a butterfly from entanglements from the past, forgone are the dreams of yesterday. In lightness shall I move. Yechtarech mes baruk astrach, nen sur clava, vesperech baru, kista esech, bicharavis, nen such manas, klech supanich, priharusachva, elstech, Aranos.
And there was a beautiful meditation by the Seer Almin entitled The Eternal Garden of Discovery of the Self. It's available on YouTube, by the way, if you want parts of that again. Absolutely beautiful meditation. I hope you enjoyed that little break, that little breather. We're going to move forward now to August the 10th, 2017, to a class given by the Seer Almin, where she talks about the old reality is gone and a new reality is beginning, which is what a total solar eclipse is all about. You remember in August there was a total solar eclipse, especially in the northern hemisphere. And the clip is very, very interesting because it takes us, back from that point where we were talking about, the truth and the processes that were going on and being crucified by matrices. So now you can see as we move forward from February 2013 to August 2017, how things have begun to shift and change for us. Somebody said to me today that things change, but yet they remain the same. Very interesting comment that. Here it is, Humanity's Death Society. It's contagious, and this is August regarding the solar eclipse.
Beloved ones, why exactly do we need such a very astronomical sign that the old reality is gone and the new reality is beginning, which a total solar eclipse is all about? Well, we have been at this particular stage many times before over the ages. And the steps in this stage is like this. Mankind's craziness escalates because they live in opposites. The more enlightened we become, the more in darkness they sink. So as long as we are living with them in opposites, in some way they make us their opposite, because the dream of duality is the dream of man. And as we rise, they sink. Then, we, in the book Journey to the Heart of God, we have discussed that when opposites are extremely far apart, it becomes very, very uncomfortable to cohabitate together. So, as they sink deeper and deeper into illusion, it becomes more and more unbearable. And incidentally, that part where that is explained is under the section of the steps to conflict resolution in the book Journey to the Heart of God. It becomes unbearable for us to be in society because the density is nauseating. It hits you in the chest when you are in a crowd of people that are fear-based and angry and desperate and guilty and all these things. And in pain, most definitely. But this is extremely distressing to us. So in the past, what happened is that the original ones would at this point withdraw from human society, but physically withdraw. They would go to an island, they would go in the mountains, they would get a space where they can live at their higher level. Because being around man continually pulls us into their paradigm. Now, we have, as the way showers, been asked to create and live in higher and higher and higher realities. The reality of Godhood, it had 441 principles, the resurrected realities, getting to the point where our reality is different than theirs, but we still stay among them. Now, there are a few problems with this, and there's a few problems if we didn't do it. Major ones. See, if we continue to try and live our life at a higher level, but man is continually reminding us of death and endings and beginnings and the things that come with duality and polarity, then it's very difficult for us to maintain the vision that is required to live in a different reality than those around you. In this way, I have in the recent retreats made the statement that man is deadly to immortal beings because their death society is everywhere. In their entertainment, what do they watch? Death. In their games, what do they play? Death. What kind of foods do they eat? Well, foods that bring death. By staying among them, we are exposed over and over and over to that which we are asked and is our destiny to overcome, the illusion of life and death. When the illusion of life and death is gone, when it is an integrated reality, what remains? Eternal existence. And eternal has to be understood to be transient eternal existence. Because if there is constant renewal, self-regeneration, self-rebirthing, it constantly dies to the old way of being. So we are continually new eternally. This is very difficult to maintain amongst man, and as it becomes almost unbearable, the original ones have always withdrawn and created a sacred place. Well, so why didn't that work? Why do you think, my beloved ones, that humanity is constantly pulling in catastrophes? Every major catastrophe, the sinking of Atlantis, the sinking of Lemuria, and both sank multiple times, etc. Polar shifts. These things have always happened, doing great destruction to the earth when the original ones withdrew into their sacred spaces, when they left the society of man. Of course, the answer is we need to figure out why, and secondly, we need to find an alternative way. And the alternative way cannot be a martyrdom of self-sacrifice, of incredible discomfort of living amongst humanity. So, secondly, let's look at why this happens.
And there we were listening to the Seer Almin discuss the aspects of humanity's death society and the tricks and techniques that humanity uses in order to literally kill themselves. So Almin is reminding us of those differences there and reminding us of the newness that a solar eclipse brought. And why we are playing that particular audio track for you was just to see a few months down the line what shifts have come up for you, what old programming perhaps you're still working with or still working through, and things like that that are happening. We must also remind you that the tablets of fire have also been released, obviously, worldwide, cosmically, through the seminars with the Russian Light family. And, of course, all of that is in play now, whether we have studied that material or not. But for me, there's a process of living in heaven and hell, both at the same times. And I don't want to focus on what is right and wrong. Just simply stand in the middle of chaos and just hold myself as stable as I possibly can. But in all fairness, many people are reporting very deep viral overload experiences. They're reporting nausea. They're reporting diarrhea. And these are all signs of density that are busy leaving us. Yesterday, I went to the medical room to see a doctor there. My blood pressure was 160 over 120. And I could feel that there was some blood pressure there. And, of course, she wanted to then take it to the absolute extreme. But if I just lay down for a few moments, we started to return more to normal. And I found that the best place for me most of the time when I'm in these particular processes, just to simply lie on the ground, do some deep breathing, and just allow all of these things to literally pass and give myself the time to do all of that. Right, so now we're going to move forward another 7 days from that past audio clip that we've just played. This is August the 17th of this year. Almin talks about the new birth of perception. She talks about it's going to bring, the solar energy will bring the energies of closing down the old and ushering in the new birth of perception, which is the new birth of the sun. She says that this one is not going to be handed to us too easily, that we're going to have to really do the work on this particular one. So again, a reminder from August until this point, just to show where we've been, what it is that we're experiencing. And let's listen to this here with new ears and an open heart, and let's just allow that to flood through us.
Beloved ones, it is never easy to be at the beginning of an evolutionary stage, as we've pointed out. But this one is a particularly large evolutionary step for us to make our way into a whole different reality, different building blocks of life. And so you can imagine that the challenge is also very large. This is where the eclipse comes in. It is here to assist us. It brings the energies of closing down the old and ushering in the new birth of perception, which is the new birth of the sun. It is the time for us to do this, and we have to eliminate all resistance to thinking that we can postpone this, it's too difficult to do, well, it's too overwhelming. Beloved ones, there is a principle of magic that says, in essence, that all resistance is the result of loss of perspective. And normally all failure and all resistance to life is the result of not understanding, because we lose the perspective of ourself as eternal beings, and not understanding that we are no longer subject to time. The bondage of time has no hold on a being that has overcome the predominant transience of the passage of time. In addition to that, we lose the perspective that we are the creator of our own boundaries and limitations, that limitlessness is part of timelessness, is part of the reality of the white light. Boundless love, boundless power, no limitations. This is the gift of where we are. But we have to now make a major change of attitude, a change of how we live our lives, and the eclipse is here to help us. Let us study this so that we can embrace and utilize its energies. We have up till now, as the spearhead, as the way showers of human evolution, which has been the spearhead of cosmic evolution for other races as well. We have had certain things as a given. Every time there was a new reality needed, we were handed on a platter its principles. And all we had to do is master those principles. In many cases, it required actually only understanding those principles and attempting to live them, but the understanding of it created an electrical-based grid that would allow a stage to form for us to play out on as we attempt to live them. This time, it is different. We are not being handed the principles on a platter. We are asked to live completely differently than we did before. So let us look at and summarize some of these that we have already discussed and some others we haven't. Firstly, the fact that we are not handed these principles means that truth lived from our highest inspiration is that which will establish the new principles of the white light. Why were we not handed this? Well, because we have stepped out of the cycles of life. Our expansion and our evolution now goes in a linear fashion. Previously, wherever we've been before. We have never been before in this level of evolved life.
And you're back in studio. There we were listening to the Sia Almin talk all about the perception of the times that we're in, that is not going to be handed to us. We're actually going to have to do the work. Very interesting. We must remember that this is the year of high magic and of entering the white light. It is something that we really having to work with, and I know many of us are doing the most amazing work and sharing it online. So I thank you for that. It really helps me in my journey, as I'm sure it helps everyone else who is tuning in and beginning to work with it. Almin tells us there that resistance to life means that there's a loss of perspective. And I must say, I start to react at those particular times when there's a loss of perspective, and I've got to really be careful of all of it. She says as well that we should be living completely differently than we did before. And I find that a belief system is at play for me as I'm going along there. You know, there's somehow a belief system maybe that don't let go of something until the next best thing has arrived. And I talked about living in heaven and hell. And I'm just trying to work with those two particular processes all the time and not give them terms and not reach for heaven and not avoid the hell, but just to learn from any particular processes that are going on and not define them as right or wrong. And there's been so many beautiful Almin wisdoms the last few weeks really helping us with all of that. But check if you're living in that belief system, because we certainly can't live in both experiences, but we can't also define them as right and wrong. And I think one of the things there we need to really look at and understand is that we have lessons to learn. So just up on Almin Diary is a beautiful audio from her about entering the white light. It's an interview with the seer, and she talks there, about entering the white light. She discusses the re-release of her earlier cookbook and why she would even publish it now that she is a vegan. This is part of the subject matter of, people are really coming down on her quite hard about certain things. Almin explains here how the book is a blueprint or a template to be adjusted according to one's dietary protocol. She also clarifies that her recent statements about diet and the reality of high magic are not about imposing rules, but rather pertain to the fact that the fear and death frequencies embedded in animal products are not conducive to transitioning into the different stages of awakening. For when you begin to enter these stages, the dream isn't completely gone, and your asleep parts are still very much affected by the stuff of the dream, such as meat and the industry that produces it. In addition, Almin alludes to a great mystical secret of the connection between us and the animal kingdom, in which what we do to our animals directly affects the state of humanity. And you'll remember just a few weeks ago I was speaking about the military aspects of some of these vegan and vegetarian Facebook posts and journeys where people are really, really militant, and it's just creating a whole lot of processes going on in responses. So I'm just watching some of that and then saying, no, I have to follow what is true to me and work with all of that. And if others then follow suit, it's up to them. So again, all focusing on what it is that I have to do for myself and not seeing what is right or wrong within anyone else. So we're going to now listen to this interview with Almin, Entering the White Light.
The first question is, the cookbook contains meat recipes, it contains sweet recipes, it contains things that I don't normally personally eat. So why read something like that? Then the second question was, how can diet affect us at all when we're in the white light? Because, that's contrary to the awakening from the dream of duality. Well, let's start with the recipe book. This recipe book is being released on the 3rd of December. I will do a book signing in the shop from 5 to 6 or 6:30. And we're also having an open house, and it's the joyous time when our Russian students are coming to America to join us. So it's sort of a welcoming for them as well. That book, first of all, just from a practical aspect, makes a great product for our little shop. Not everybody wants to buy spirit books, but they want to take a little piece of the experience with them, and that would be a very good answer. Plus, it's a book that's beautifully done. Well, it will be. So the second reason for the release of the book on a practical level is that of all things, loving to turn to a page, you can put your page marker in. In other words, it needs to be a physical book you can refer to as you cook your food. So, speaking for myself, any book that's a beloved cookbook is like a friend. I carry it wherever I go. Now, we've had that book electronically available as my gift for many years. Obviously, to print a physical book, especially with color, you are going to have to, pay quite a bit to produce each book. Quite a bit as in not free. So this book comes at a price, and there's no longer a free version available electronically. So that's the practical information. Now, let's take a look at the other. This book contains my family recipes, my favorite recipes that I've experimented on through the years. It's a little part of a very full cooking journey for me that I'm sharing. The Duchess of Valderrama and the Duke had for many years traveled between the palaces of Europe, and they've taken pictures of the palaces and so on, and also always taken one extraordinary recipe or menu away with them as they were permitted to interview the chefs of these incredible homes of the aristocracy of Europe. So we're getting a glimpse into a whole other culinary realm that the Duchess is bringing in of the kind of recipes, that have died out in many instances when those huge palatial homes were not occupied anymore. Some still are, but many of them the families have moved on. So that's the content of the book. The purpose of these recipes is that everybody can use them. So now we have the public walking into the little shop, buying a book off the shelf. Secondly, when I do your healing oils, I give you, just as a suggestion, because I do stress that something is needed from your side to signal the universe that you're ready to move beyond this dream of ailment. So I tell you the diet that will most succinctly address what you're eating, because what you're experiencing in terms of ailments, virtually all ailments originate in the gastrointestinal tract. So it's, as I search for your root of your ailments, it invariably leads me to the gastrointestinal tract. So I have advised some of you to take the Candida diet, which definitely, for instance, includes meat. The Candida diet, because I could see that the fungus is all through your body. And I could see that if you did that, within 2 months, you would start to reclaim your life back. You would feel such a difference. Then, I've suggested some of you go on a vegan diet. And that, usually within 3 weeks, you can see a major difference in arthritis-type symptoms, some heart issues, things like that. Some of you I've suggested a vegetarian diet. And that usually will take a couple of months for the blood to become less acidic. So that makes a big difference in many viruses, bacteria, and so on. So, beloved ones, some of you out there have been making really wise food choices for years. Your criteria is, is it organic? Is it alive? Etc. I can see it when I work on finding any cause in your body for something. So, we have people that prefer not to do diets, so they eat what they want to eat. They try sort of here or there to make a good choice, but it's, more of an issue of moderation in all things, and I eat what I want. Okay, the book has to work for you. The book has to work for somebody that walks in off the street and lives on McDonald's. The book has to work for the vegan. The book has to work for the Candida patient or the vegetarian. How do you do that? You give basic recipes. They are the template. So a recipe, whatever undesirable elements it may have in it for your special diet, is a grid work. You substitute, you put different things in, you make the recipe work to fit your lifestyle. An example, if you're on a Candida diet and it calls for flour, you may want to substitute it with bean flour, with garbanzo bean flour, or some other flour that you are able to eat. If it calls for sugar, well, you can substitute it with stevia powder if you're going to bake. Otherwise, the stevia dropper, they advocate drops. I use it by the dropper full. But the substitution makes the recipe work for you. So if you're vegan and there's a stew, use the stew recipe. If it calls for milk, you use the unsweetened almond milk, or the almond milk's possibly the best, or rice milk, but unsweetened, non-vanilla, and you use that instead. And the meat element you can substitute with the eggplant, for instance, by cubing your eggplant. There's various ways in which you can substitute, because you're all on different diets. But in this way, you have your groundwork. You know, you have maybe a stuffed tomato that you're going to stuff with tuna. Just don't go into the realm of soy, my beloved ones, because it's not healthy unless it's fermented soy. So if it's a stuffed tomato, you know, there are grain meat substitute that you can actually make into patties and fry in a pan like you would a hamburger patty, but it's entirely made from grains and not soy. So you could loosely fry that in the pan and make a sauce and stuff that in your tomato. There are vegan mayonnaises available that don't contain soy that you can mix it with, make a salad from it. So use your imagination to substitute. The book is meant as a blueprint. The blueprint is what you're getting when you get the recipe book. Now, your other question, Rogier, was a little more abstract. So the question is, you know, if you're moving into the white light, why think these things are going to affect you at all? I understand that question. But a few days ago, I answered a similar question about atoms, actually, and it doesn't sound similar, but it had a similar answer. And that is that the awakening from the dream, which is what the white light reality is, it has stages in it. 4 big stages with 2 smaller stages in each of the 4. This is your white light reality. The white light reality, the first phase of the first stage, which is what you come into when you awaken, you're half asleep, half awake. Like when you wake up in the morning, the alarm has gone off, you've put it off, you don't jump out of bed, jump in your clothes, do some push-ups, you know, grab a pan, start frying your breakfast or whatever you do. I mean, you wake up slowly, otherwise your day doesn't feel quite right. You feel disoriented. You're going to wake up slowly. So, as you awaken, and actually, it starts in sort of the last phase of the third resurrection, where you just start to do practices to live as though you're in the white light. That's what we're doing. Because some of you have gone into the white light. When I had the last, I think it was in March or May or something, I had a Russian personal retreat with a group of my Russian family. And some of them went actually into white light reality, but they weren't in there for more than a day or two. And then they all went out again because they went back to the airplane. There was anxiety over the ticket. They were hustling for seats. They were still eating the same foods they ate before. They were still buying things at the airport store because I forgot to buy Billy a present. In other words, they re-engaged in human-type life, the life of the dream. And it's not that all the stages are human, but it's the human paradigm that we're living in. So it pulled them right back out again. So let us take a look at your question. Firstly, all of you are in the resurrection stages. There are one or two that are still in the God stages, just a handful. Mostly you're in the resurrection stages. Quite a few in the advanced resurrection stages. So the more you can live as though you are in the white light, the more easy your transition becomes. And you may then ask me, of course, why could that be a difficult transition? And I can certainly answer that, but that is an easier transition to a very large step ahead. So putting the fear frequencies and the death frequencies of animals in there, the unwholesome disrespect to them which are in their products, into your body, is not helping to make that transition. When you've got enough of your life in order, those things won't feel correct. It's not that in the white light you can't eat meat. You don't want to. It feels incredibly toxic because you could feel the life of the animals and the terror of them. You can also sense deep inside that in some way what you do to the animals is affecting directly the level at which man lives. It's a mystical secret that I haven't gone into, but I can feel that it's there. So why not eat meat? Well, firstly, because in resurrection, the more of these old paradigm things you do, the harder the transition is going to be. And the more delayed, because you don't want it to be hard. So the next thing is, because as a master, you start to take responsibility for the world around you. A resurrection stage is an advanced master. And it is by proxy that you say no to an animal industry that is destroying the ecosystem, harming the animals, and by harming them, in a very mystical connection, harming humanity. And the answer to that question of how doing this to animals can actually lower the level of human life, humanity, is in the 18 wheel of high magic, the last 18 wheels of high magic, which I did during the Moscow retreat. The answer to that question lies in those 18 wheels. So, beloved ones, then, let's say you go into the white light. Surely now you can eat what you want and it wouldn't affect you. It's like saying, okay, I'm awake now, but I can still act as though there's some pieces of the dream are valid. For instance, I got insulted by my neighbor in my dream. I'm awake now, but I'm still furious at my neighbor because he insulted me in my dream. Go figure. The dream isn't entirely gone. Pieces of you, especially pieces related to things you didn't feel like advancing in resurrection, still linger asleep while you are waking up. And this causes discomfort. It causes, discomfort anywhere in the body, for instance. The asleep parts of you are still affected by, say, meat or this or that, or to support an industry that is so destructive to all life on Earth. It is still, the parts that are correlating to that are still affected by things from the dream. So to get those parts to wake up, you apply higher principles to them. So that is why there is far more to this dietary issue than what appears to be. I'm not suggesting that you do exactly as I say, but that you be aware of it and feel when it feels right for you. So I hope that answers the question.
There was the Seer Almin talking about entering the white light and some of the dietary processes that can influence us and affect us as we enter. And a very interesting question being posed there. Which parts of the old reality do we still keep going because it suits us? Also had a conversation like that with a colleague of mine earlier today as we worked through some of the processes we are building. So Almin says, happy Thanksgiving to our American Light family. I am grateful that we can walk this eternal journey together. Many blessings, dear ones. There's a process that she's putting into place to celebrate the holiday season. She's requested that there be weekly giveaways from now until December the 21st. This week's free gifts for you, yourself, or a friend. The first 4 people to request a free time map today will have the time map created by Almin. She says by sending your name and contact information to team@almin.net, then they will contact you accordingly. Latest message on Lightworkers, all about the Garden of Eden, the good ones, and the Infinite's daydream. Fascinating insights if you are subscribed to the latest, or to the messages for Lightworkers. So earlier I told you about the drive home today, 2 hours in the traffic, and a beautiful song came up on the radio. One of my absolute favorites. It's a classic. We're going to go to California right now and listen to the Eagles, listen to the lyrics, how pertinent they are about living in heaven and hell and the choices we make in our lives. From me here in the studio, Paul, goodbye, love, praise, gratitude and trust. Thank you to Nico for handling our sound desk. Looks like we had a smooth run right through tonight, even though we had a big storm raging outside. And we will see you next week with some more great insights, some more fun, some fantastic music, and of course some time together as our light family around the world. Goodbye until then.
On a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair, warm smell of politas rising up through the air. Up ahead in the distance, I saw a shimmering light. My head grew heavy and my sight grew dim. I had to stop for the night. There she stood in the doorway. The mission bell. I was thinking to myself, this could be heaven and this could be hell. Then she lit up a candle and she showed me the way. place, such a lovely face. Pretty room at the Hotel California. Any time of year, you can find it here. Her mind is differently twisted. She got the Mercedes Benz. She got a lot of pretty, pretty boys. She calls friends. How they dance in the courtyard. Sweet summer sweat. Some dance to remember. Some dance to forget. So I called up the captain. Please bring me my wine. He said, we haven't had that spirit here since 1969. And still those voices are calling from far away. Wake you up in the middle of the night just to hear them say, welcome to the Hotel California. Such a lovely place, such a lovely place, such a lovely place. They're living it up at the Hotel California. What a nice surprise, what a nice surprise. Here mirrors on the ceiling, depict champagne on ice. And she said, we are all just prisoners here of our own device. And in the master's chambers, they're gathered for the feast. They stab it with their steely knives, but they just can't kill the beast. Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find a passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the nightman, we are programmed to receive. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
You've been listening to Radio Belvaspita, South Africa. Thank you for listening and sharing in our discussion. Should you have any questions with regards to the healing modality of Belvaspita or have any healing needs, please send us an email to info@belvaspita.co.za or add comments to our page on Spreaker.com so we can work on providing a suitable response. We now close this episode with the eternal ascension qualities of love, praise, gratitude and trust, and look forward to sharing again with you next week. Goodbye.